This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
All right, calling to order the meeting of the Ad Hoc Grant Search Committee for October 24th at 2 o'clock. We have Kate and myself at the present time. Scott may or may not join us, not totally sure. We had 2 possible members last time, and since then, Bruce has indicated he would like to probably try to at least attend another meeting and hear more about what we do before actually putting in his application, but I think he will be trying to at least perhaps join us, and he just couldn't make it today. And Pam has decided that we just don't quite fit her work schedule, unfortunately, but if we find something where she might be useful, I bet we could reach out and have her help on something if we needed to. So she didn't want to
I'd hate to commit you to like after work hours meetings. I mean, I'm sure I could figure it out, but like I just feel like that's a little unfair to you, who, is kind of just doing this out of the, gracious goodness of your heart.
Yeah. Well, it's hard. I mean, everybody, there's so many evening meetings. This actually works out okay for me. So this is fine actually to have a day meeting. It's kind of good. So I'm fine. So anyway, we'll continue on. We'll, if we have Bruce, that'll be good. And like I said, we can also, from time to time, if we need Diana to do a quick proofread, I think she would not object to that. So I think it's just people are trying to make a, a more consistent commitment, I guess, is maybe the challenge. But
anyway. It's also easier to organize meetings when it's like, 3 people.
Yeah, some days that's quite true. Anyway, so good. I don't see anybody for open time for the public as usual. We don't have any meeting minutes, I don't think, from last time. If you sent them to me, I forgot.
I think I did, but it's okay if you want to review them next time.
Okay, yeah, I forgot. I didn't pull them up. I'm sorry. So we'll pick them up next time. So basically, just new business. A couple things. Got in on a webinar on the MVP 2.0, which is kind of interesting. So I guess some things had been happening earlier on. They decided to do some sort of revamping of the planning grant process and go deeper into the planning grant process, I think, than what had been done on the 1.0. So we did the 1.0. We are an MVP community. We are totally authorized to jump right into the action grant. So the 2.0 right now apparently has already had a pilot round with certain selected communities, and I don't know how they were selected. Many of them are toward the eastern part of the state, but not all. And they have gone through some sort of training, I gather, on this. And they are the ones that are now being asked to apply for the 2.0. So they're going to be doing this in very small groups to eventually cover all the communities, I guess. But there's a set number of communities that have already gone through a preliminary 2.0 training that now are required to put in an application on the MVP 2.0. And that, I believe, gets them about $50,000 towards a seed project that they can actually start to implement. So we are not in that round. We're not even on the list for next year. I did call, and I don't know how these groups are being chosen, but I did call the MVP coordinator for our region and talk to him, a guy named Andrew Smith. And he confirmed that we could apply to the 2.0 if we wanted to, but we wouldn't be given any priority because, other groups are, bigger priority. Even if there was some leftover money, well, maybe, so I was like, no, that doesn't sound like it's worth our time. But he did say that, we could and should look at the action grant. And yes, the expression of interest is due November 1st. However, he said, don't worry about it. He would be glad to even talk through some ideas on the phone. So not to stress about the deadline. So when you get settled for a minute, I do have the application form. I'll pull it up and share if I can find it. I can share my computer on that. So that expression of interest is November 1st, but again, it's a deadline, but he sounded very flexible to just help us talk through things. And then the actual grant application, I think, comes out in maybe early March, and it's due sometime in April. So there's time. to get all that done. The maximum for a community is for an individual project rather, so a community project is $3 million. So that's the max. And he said there's no real minimum. It's like, okay, well, that's quite a
I'm
range
sorry.
there.
So you jumped over your phone. I think it froze when I walked back into the house. So we moved on
Okay.
from MVP to which program?
So this is still MVP. So instead of being under the 2.0, you're on twice now. Hold on.
I know I'm gonna get off my phone because it's hard to hold.
You may have a echo there.
Got it. Oh,
Yeah.
got it. So
So the 2.0 doesn't really apply to us. We're not on the list even for next year. And eventually, so I called this coordinator guy and he said, yeah, sure. The action grant is what you're eligible for. That's what you should probably aim for. And even though there is the EOI deadline of November 1, he said, don't stress out over it. If you've got something to put down, fine. But if not, as we've noted in the instructions, it's not required, but it's a good idea to get that feedback. And he would be glad to, set up a time and talk to us about any of our ideas, just irrespective of that November 1 deadline. So he sounded very flexible in that regard. I sent him an email just so he has my email address and told him that we were already working on the stormwater culvert project, so that he knows that we're doing something. But maybe he will have a chance to look at our actual MVP plan. And then when we talk, maybe we can set a time and we could invite him to the next grant meeting, for example, and, have him, if he's looked at our plan, maybe give us an idea of any of our priorities. I mean, obviously, I think we'd have to choose one of our high priorities in order to be competitive. If we picked something that's a middle or a low priority for the town, I don't think we'd probably get very far. So, we'd have to go back and look at the some of those high priorities again from the plan.
Do you know what the scoring is for? Like, do they have a thing that gives you any insight onto how the grant is scored, like other than priority? Like, because I've seen a couple of programs that have really prioritized like resident feedback or like community participation. So I just wonder if it's worth soliciting some, or if it's advised that we maybe like pool the poll the people that were involved in the MVP planning process to say, okay, well, we have this opportunity. We'd love to, get some feedback because, I mean, it was amazing to me how many different, like, everybody kind of went there with a specific focus and like a specific, like almost like an agenda almost, and a different, very different, perspective on what they think should be the priorities. And of course, that was like a couple of years ago.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it was probably closer to 3 years, I think. And anyway, and I was not part of that actual planning process. I wasn't on that group. So people like Brittany Gutermuth, for example, were on it. She's reached out to me a couple of times. We've talked a little bit about, some climate resiliency kind of ideas. I mean, I guess I'm not quite sure how well that got covered in the MVP originally, but I assume that any of the priority actions or any of the actions that were listed in the report came about because somehow it was impacted by climate change. I'm guessing on most of them anyway. And then we do have, as I mentioned before, I think this MVP plan really dovetails, or if not overlaps, with the hazard mitigation plan, and that upgrade is ongoing now with PVPC. And so there will be a chance on November 12th. There's going to be a meeting tied in with our select board meeting, probably at 7:00. And we'll probably, I was talking to Scott today, I think we'll end up trying to make that a hybrid meeting so that the public can join in at 7:00 and hear the presentation on the hazard mitigation plan, and have them either orally or afterwards, set up an email so they can ask questions, whatever, get some of that feedback. So that will be happening on November 12th. So that will give us a little bit of input there too, which is helpful. So yeah, I don't think there's anything yet out on scoring. Getting back to your question, that will come out when they release the NOFO it tells you all the details of how to apply and how every section is scored. So nothing yet, although we might find online there's probably an old one from, FY24 or something. So that's possible. One of the things I do have is the webinar, and I thought I'd circulate it to you and Bruce and anybody else, but there was a webinar. So right now they're in the FY25 round, even though we're still, we're still in calendar 24. It's FY25. So they've just awarded the FY25 ones. So I think there is on the website now a listing probably of projects that were approved, as well as there would have been the webinar that would have preceded the application that talked about, how to apply. So I'm going to guess that webinar wouldn't be bad for us to listen to now ahead of time. I doubt it's going to be changed a whole lot when the one comes out, in January or whatever. So I think I'll send a link around just so that people, if they have time to, sit.
I'll be happy to watch it. I couldn't watch it like live because I think I had another meeting going on. And I said this past few weeks have just been like kind of.
Oh yeah, no, that's fine. So it just kind of gives an idea of the kind of things that they, that had changed, I guess, from past action grant. So I will send a couple things around related to that. What I've got up on my screen, I think, can you see that? Okay.
Yes.
So let me scroll. So this is the EOI form for now FY26, which is what we'd be doing. So we can do, so it's not mandatory, as we said. We can put in 2 ideas, a different form for each. Okay, so there's 2 ideas that we could possibly put in. So I'll just scroll down. Some of this is not complicated, basic contact information. So your project idea, so some of these core principles. So apparently there's a feedback call that comes in to talk about these in more detail. So we'd have to kind of really catch up with some of the jargon that's in here, just review these core principles and refresh our minds on these. Take a look at especially these nature-based solution ideas. That would be a thing I know that I need to refresh my brain on. And then if we were to do any regional thing, as usual, any of these grants, if there were a regional collaboration, we'd probably get extra points, but I don't know that we have to go out and strive to be regional if there's not a natural occurring something that we're working on with another community already, I wonder
if that's part of the scoring though.
It could be, yeah. So, but anyway, hopefully it doesn't, they can't make it so good that they kick out everybody who doesn't have a regional partner though. So I don't know, they got to find that happy medium somewhere. Anything with any other partnerships. So this might fit more any other groups within the town rather than a regional one. Some thoughts.
Just thinking about some of the other meetings I've been in recently. There have been like between Mima and like Lauren Davin in Northampton, there's been a lot of conversations about specifically like climate resilience. And like, I just wonder, like, even if it's a little bit indirect, if it is worth points to say, we're collaborating with the Shared Public Health Excellence Program because we're part of that, like just thinking about that as like, because there's been a lot of talk at Mima, for instance, about like, vulnerable populations and weather incidences and like improving the structure of the command structure across the state in terms of like being prepared for hurricane hits some major medical suppliers, or something like that.
No, that's true.
It's just something to think. Like, I'm happy to talk to Lauren because I've been trying to go to the regional preparedness meetings, and if there's something that like even we can say like we are trying to partner, especially in terms of like our shelters in Northampton. There's a lot that we're indirectly planning from a regional perspective, mostly because we don't have the resources in Southampton.
Correct. No, that's quite true. Quite true. Absolutely. Yeah. So no, that's a great idea, Kate. That's fine. Yeah. Jumping down into project types. So there's 3 different ones. So again, we'd have to figure out which category, what ideas it would be good. I would think if we happen to have 2 ideas that we have, one in each, 1 and 2 of the categories, whatever those might be. I don't know whether any of our future construction stuff yet. We may be still too early on public safety or senior center to get into some of that, but the design and permitting is always a challenging one to get money for. So we'll have to see what kind of ideas we come up with. So there's a map. We must be on the map somewhere here. I won't bother to pull it up, but so address and then a description of the idea. And then it goes into hazards that it will address. So we're probably not dealing so much with coastal flooding, but we'd figure out whatever, probably storms and I don't know, storms and drought, maybe. I don't know. Possible.
You think about vulnerable populations in our specific community and elderly people who have wells. I'm just like thinking out loud, but like, we do have a large elderly population. Heat is a big topic of conversation, especially related to air quality. And, you think about storms with power loss. I remember that was one thing that came up during the initial MVP planning process was the large number of people who are resilient, reliant on wells, and how our grid is like pretty it's not really redundant. So it puts a lot of people at risk.
Okay, good point. So that's the kind of thing that, might, lead us to at least figuring out which hazards we would try to address. Yeah. And then of those two that we choose, 4 impacts that this project would address. So some in economic area, some in basically sort of the human social area. So some of these things like you were talking about, heat effects from degraded air quality, for example, that kind of thing. Infrastructure here would be maybe loss of energy would be one. If we lost our electric power for whatever reason, that would be, for an extended period of time, that would be a tough one for us probably. Natural environment, again, some of these don't really apply to us, but there are some that we would find. I'm sure we could find something in here.
Did you hear about the brush fires in Connecticut?
I did. Oh my gosh.
But that really kind of feel like it brings it pretty close to home how, how feasible it would be for there to be wildfires really close to here.
Yeah, no, it is incredibly dry. I mean, I can just speak from digging in my own garden area. It's just amazing how dry it is. Yep. So that, and then just overall governance. So there's, 4 or 5 categories to go through and check, 1 or 2 things in terms of what the impact of what we would want to do as a project, how it would affect, what the outcome would do. And then it comes down into the major tasks so these would be sort of the line items of the budget, I guess, that would be funded. How long it would be, what the cost would be. Now, do you need assistance with incorporating community engagement? So here's something, or assistance identifying environmental justice populations. So it gives you a chance in the EOI to say, yes, we need help, which is good, rather than trying to, make up something out of thin air. And then help identifying natural hazards, data, products, and resources. So maybe, depending on how good our data research skills are here. And
honestly, I think it wouldn't hurt to just say, yes, we'd love some help. And they have people at the state that aggregate data for a job.
Exactly. I know we don't need to knock ourselves out. I totally agree. I think sometimes we do things the hard way, but exactly. And I think that was it, because this is the MVP 2.0, and these are the only communities that are involved in it.
Got it.
So we're not there.
I wonder how they picked them. Ashfield seems so random.
Yeah, and I don't know whether they might have had a call for expressions of interest, early on, and we missed it. Quite possible. There might have been something out there more than a year ago that we missed completely. That then, this is the group that signed up, and therefore now they have to do their little practice action grant or something. So the form is not terribly complicated. We just have to come up with some good ideas, basically. So that's what that is. So I think that's not a terribly heavy lift. The worst part is just going back through that MVP plan and saying, okay, what is it? Because I remember, like the school generator was there and a few other things, right? But um, uh, I don't know.
I don't think that you can apply for So I think this is one thing that came up like while we were talking about it before. I want to say that like diesel generators,
yeah,
or gas powered generators are not an allowed
that would make
expense
sense.
or grant, right? Because it's about like improving the environment.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think,
cost
from what this guy on the phone was saying, he said, there's a lot of effort on decarbonization.
right. So generators don't really fall into
Right.
those
So trying
categories.
to figure out, what that might, look like for us related to some of the priorities that we had established in the MVP plan. So I think
So
that's
I'm
that's
just
kind of
thinking, I'm actually looking, I don't know if it would be helpful to pull up the actual MVP like priority list, because it basically gives us everything that like all the participants who
sure.
attended the workshop. So, and then it also it basically tells you what the priorities are for sure.
There was a matrix or something. Yeah,
Yeah,
go
I
ahead.
have it right here.
You can share the screen. Go ahead.
But I'm just saying, like, maybe we could even just look at it and think about like, all right, Zoom. Wait, that's not what I want. Share screen one. Can you see my screen?
Yep, I can. Mm-hmm.
So we talked about this culvert assessment as a high priority. So you see HML in the right-hand column for high, medium, low.
Right. Yep.
So these are the high priority lists. So it says highway department conduct a townwide road assessment, which sounds like that's already happening.
Well, the road is, I think the culvert might be another separate, it's down like on the third block there, culverts, bridges, and stormwater infrastructure.
Yeah.
That's what's happening.
Okay.
The second blue one. Yeah.
The second blue one. Oh, okay. Stormwater bylaw, field inventory. Okay. Address green infrastructure opportunities for stormwater management. That's the one we applied for and didn't get, right?
Well, no. So the one, hang on. The one right in the middle, a field inventory of culverts.
The green infrastructure opportunities for stormwater management. Or was it just the culverts that?
It's pretty well. The culverts tie into the whole stormwater management. So there had been the application into MVP probably 2 years ago now. For that, did not get awarded, but
right.
Ty and Bond reapplied, and we got it through the Clean Water Action Grant or something. So it wasn't Great. MVP funded, but it is being funded. We got $84,000 to carry this out. So that's ongoing now. And in
so
fact,
you think about this, okay, maybe Randall would be able to weigh in if we think it would be beneficial to prioritize a road assessment.
Right.
It says high priority, establish the feasibility of establishing a microgrid that would serve the new public safety complex, school, or other municipal facilities. I feel like that's a good thing to do later. You know what I mean? Like when we're actually in the building stage.
But it's a feasibility. It's a feasibility though, so it might be a right time. You never know.
Right, true. That's true.
No, there's one above it. What was the one right above it? They're not all in blue. So there's other H's there. The one Eversource.
Oh, it says coordinate with Eversource to manipulate circuits to isolate outages to lower priority. So this is what I was talking about. Like our grid is very like limiting in the sense that like if power lines go down, say here, it's going to have a pretty widespread impact in town because there's limited redundance, which obviously in a big storm like a microburst or something would be really difficult to navigate.
Yep.
I actually don't think that that's a bad idea. I mean, I'm very fortunate to be right off of College Highway, but thinking going back to the vulnerable populations, I think understanding who, like, it's hard to know who is the most at risk without, I guess maybe some of that information exists, but like, I don't know how many people it would impact, or I guess it would depend on the nature of the emergency. We talked about the sewer. I feel like we've talked a lot about sewers in our meetings about It's just, I mean, I know that they're looking into doing the sewer line along the bike path, which I think isn't a bad idea. But I think going beyond that, that's a pretty big undertaking.
That's a heavy lift. And even that one, I mean, it's a feasibility study for the bike path one, which even though it's probably is going to end up showing itself feasible, I mean, I can't even imagine what the cost of that one's going to be.
Of
So again,
course.
the cost of that on top of building two facilities, on top of
Yeah,
the
it's
greenway,
crazy.
on top of, I mean, it's like, it's going to be a lot. So I don't know. But yeah, I think that's not too much. So some of these, we're
See,
starting to
like
get
the
into
repeating we
some of
did.
there's some other high ones in here in the middle. So
So
the
we
dispatch
did the code red. So we did the
that
dispatching. They
the
moved
dis
that.
the dispatch repeater's been dealt with. That's all done. That
Evaluate
happened.
technology
That
used for,
we could
oh,
check
sorry.
on that, or that little one there, that one about potential vulnerabilities in that one you're focusing on. That feels like that's something that could be folded into a bigger project,
For
you
sure.
know,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
and not a project by itself offhand. Um,
You
yeah,
know, one thing
skeptic.
that I'm surprised to not see here as a high priority, and maybe it's listed somewhere, is the risk of drought because we're like on one aquifer. I remember Tim Gaudet went to the meetings and was talking about like the risk of the wells drying out if there's prolonged droughts.
Yeah,
Evaluate options for establishing a public safety complex in a
yeah.
low
So dealt with.
acidification.
Yeah.
You know, I wonder if it's worth asking them, say that this is a high priority. We're in the stages of purchasing land. Is there any, like, maybe it'd be worth asking this representative that you spoke to, saying that this is one of our major initiatives to improve our emergency management. Is there anything that you would suggest that we could plan for to support, the engineering, permitting, planning?
Yeah, that might be an idea. And I think that, going back to the microgrid idea, there might be something that could be tied in because I mean, as Stephen keeps saying, I mean, it's a blank slate. We've got, we own the land now. We closed on so we own it. And we're about ready to hire the land use planner. We've identified a firm to help us do that. PVPC along with another landscape type firm, landscape architecture firm. So that's going to get going very soon. So,
Maybe there's a way you could plant certain trees there. You know what I mean? Like maybe there would be a way
yeah,
to make it like a super green facility, which would be like,
right.
something the state would see as being pretty neat. And also like if there's a way that it could support operations of other municipal buildings, like if we could
Uh-huh.
incorporate all of that together, that would be pretty neat.
Hmm. Yeah. So a lot of these things, just with the current building code and stuff, it's amazing how much you've got to have kind of a green design in mind.
Yeah.
So, the roof has got to be solar ready. You don't have to put in solar panels, but it's got to be solar ready. You've got to be, I think, solar ready to put in charging, whatchamacallit, vehicle charging, electric vehicle charging
Oh,
thing. So all these things are now requirements. So things have changed a lot, but yeah. So any of the
so
other high
establish
priority,
heating. Here's another one. Establish heating and cooling centers in town and
that that's one that's come up so many times. I think we need to really think about that one.
I think that, but the problem, so I've thought about this before and we've talked about it before. The challenge is, okay, Norris School doesn't have air conditioning.
Yeah.
So the problem is that what could be a designated cooling station isn't going to be cool during the hottest months.
Mhm.
So unless and again, going back to the generator thing, like I don't think this particular program is going to um pay for generators, but like maybe I don't think they're going to pay for air conditioners either unless they're like,
Mhm.
solar powered or something. But
Yeah.
I mean I feel like this is part of that regional preparedness with MEMA. Like there's going to be a community assessment, and I know that one of the priority populations is like, the adult and aging population with heat. So I think I do think that that should be a priority. I just don't know what it would look like given like the buildings that we have right now. I think that goes back to supporting infrastructure in either like probably in the senior center that would allow for us to have a cooling station. I don't, if that makes, I don't think it makes sense to invest a bunch of money into Norris unless they're going to put air conditioning in the whole school.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, at some point in time, once we move into a real senior center, then that space, at least temporarily in the town hall, would be vacant, although I would see that being swallowed up by offices pretty quickly too.
Of course, I know everyone's like,
so how much that could really serve as a cooling and heating center, I don't know, but it's worth talking about and see what others think about at some point in time, because it definitely has come up more than once.
Or we could make it maybe they would be willing to pay for part of the planning to incorporate green design and all of the, their catchy phrases that they're using this year, about like, how can we build this into the new infrastructure in town? Maybe it would help cover some of like the design costs.
Maybe, never know. Yep. So there's a couple things there. Yep.
Well, if we think about what we need to spend a lot of money on in town, I feel like that's that's one of that.
For sure.
It'd be good to, it'd be good to kind of wrap these things together, because I wonder if it would allow for us to apply for future funding. I mean, $3 million is a lot of money.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So.
Oh yeah, hiring a town planner, conservation agent, and enforcement agent. Like the group prioritized that as high, and I was like, okay. So like the idea was that it would reduce reliance on unpaid volunteers. I'm like, but a grant's not. I don't think a grant program
it's not sustainable either. I mean, now we've
not fun staffing.
Exactly. So that's a challenge too. So, and I don't know if any of the medium ones are worth thinking about. The low ones, I don't think I'd honestly even look at.
Support local businesses in adapting to the effects of climate change to make the business community. So that goes like to the economic impacts of disasters. I think about like grocery stores especially, but I mean, it's not like Big Y doesn't have money.
Right. Exactly. What else is down there? Anything? What's that? Norris? What's the other Norris one there? Address.
Yeah, I think when there hasn't been enough mosquito-borne illness around here for me to be like, yeah, we need to prioritize.
Right. Yeah. And then here's the aquifer. Yeah, the aquifer one you were talking about here.
Whoops.
I'm glad I'm not the only one that does that.
I must have right. What the heck? It's like I don't.
You must have hit the draw button or something. Yeah.
I don't even know. Okay. Yeah. See, it keeps clicking on comments. Maybe it's like an edit mode. Okay. So it says tree and forest management plan. That's probably going to come up at some point. Mandatory water restrictions.
So Barnes Aquifer.
Encourage residential water conservation practices.
And I think planning board was talking about getting the Barnes Aquifer group back together again. So that some of that stuff is kind of fomenting, a little bit on its own. So nothing that would be worth a grant, I don't think. So maybe
the other thing with the water supply is how extended droughts might impact agriculture. Like I think about the Fletcher farm, and if they couldn't get water, I mean,
I mean that would be more water for their animals. They don't irrigate anything, so these pumpkins have really grown this well without water.
Yeah, true.
Been a very dry summer. So
I think that's I mean, you can see how much on this we've already done, and I feel like
I know
the priorities sound like it would be to something related to vulnerable populations. I think of heat, but there's also like the energy, like power loss concerns, flooding, but we're not like in a floodplain.
I know. So maybe just if you had your color on there a minute ago, I don't know if that'll allow you to turn something green or something. A couple of these 3 or 4 that we talked about that are in the high priority one, and then while you're in there though, can you scroll back to the page that shows who was at the meeting? Because that would be helpful to. I've got it on my screen. I mean, I got it in my thing here. So
that's like the regional team, and then these are the people who went.
Okay, good. So perfect. So most of those people, 2 or 3 anyway. Okay,
There's
a lot of
Brittany.
them. Yeah, a lot of them are still around.
Like Brittany was really focused on the conservation aspects of climate
Right.
resilience, like
Yeah.
really talking about vernal pools and how we could dry. It's like everybody came here with a very different perspective.
Sure.
Police and fire, his main thing was the repeater, not the risk
Right.
of the repeater getting, and of course
Yeah.
Eliza, her focus is what to do about the school. So it
Yeah.
was an interesting process, but I also feel like looking back at it, like I do wish that we had really like dove into what was feasible, and like yes, it'd be nice to fix these things,
Yeah.
but like
Yep.
when they said that they're prioritizing high, medium, low, like
Yeah.
I feel like that priority list, it would have been good to prioritize like, okay, this is what we're capable of doing now, and use that to gauge the high, medium, low, instead of like, just opinion, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Well, or take, with everybody's sort of individual priorities in that sense, to then pull together all the high priorities, the highly ranked ones, and then say, okay, here's everything that we want to do that we think is high priority. Again, you're correct. What's feasible? There's a lot
Yeah.
of things you want to do, but they need so much outside help to get them done. What is it we can work on ourselves, or how much outside help do we need? But then how do they rank in terms of their priority? They're all high, but can't you rank the highs, 1 to 5, that this is our absolute highest must do priority? And I think that's another step of the process that seemingly did not happen.
Well, I think it wasn't part of, they had a very structured process when we were going through this. Like basically we went to workshops, and then like a lot of it was done on calls, and they had a facilitator from the MVP planning process. What was her name?
It was Fuss and O'Neill that put it out. They were the local contractors. Yeah.
So maybe it was Julianne and Sarah that were leading, like, yeah, facilitated
Yeah.
conversations where they basically prompted questions and
Uh-huh.
they basically prompted the discussion to generate this plan. So I actually think that they took what was given to them, and like, it's not like we had a ton of meetings either. So you imagine in the moment, if 4 of those people or 5 of those people are participating in the meeting, the high priorities are going to look very different based upon who's in the group too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, even just taking the people in the town group, that we could, certainly send
Like
out an
Don,
email.
like look how many people aren't even here.
Well, the top 3 are not there, but other people. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that are there. But then
Well,
somewhere up above,
Maureen's kind of out
there
too.
was another list up above that had more town people, though, right?
Yeah, this is the
Oh,
list. So do you want me to email this document to you? It's
no,
on our
that's okay. I've got the report on my in my hard drive somewhere. I didn't pull it up today. Yeah, so a lot of these folks are around still, just our local town people.
Yeah,
Um,
I'd love to hear like what Randall says and what Tim says.
yeah,
Like, okay, maybe you circulate it with this document to say, okay, this is what we discussed in 2021, recognizing some of these things have been accomplished already. We need to submit some sort of expression of interest. And I think even if we make it about, like, say that we're trying to focus on vulnerable populations, like even if we could throw together an EOI to just say we're like, we want to explore blank, and maybe it's even identifying like who is vulnerable in town. Like we don't even know, like I feel like we don't even really know that other than like age demographics. It's like complicated.
good point. Yep. Okay. Well, why don't let me see if I can tinker with something like an email. I mean, I'll shoot it over to you first before I would send it out. But we could attach just I wouldn't attach the whole report. I think I just attached that matrix. I think that was
Oh, just like the grid. I think that's
yeah.
fine.
Yeah,
What
because
else?
nobody's going to read through the whole report again, I'm sure. But
Well,
just to say,
they also listed in bullet points.
okay,
Like they have it in bullet points, and they have it as a grid. So I don't know. You can do it.
All right.
Top
Yeah. Okay.
recommendation.
Perfect. Okay. No, that might be easier for people to digest. Sometimes that chart looks a little bit crazy to read and understand. Okay. No, I will focus on that and see if I can pull some thoughts together. But I think your idea of sending it around to several of the townspeople anyway that were on the original MVP committee and say, hey guys, we've got a chance to apply for the action grant. You know, and I'm not going to worry about this November 1st date. I mean, if we can, talk to this guy informally and, we'll have a month or two to sort of toss around ideas and we're ready to put in, an actual project in March or April or March, I guess, that's okay with me. I mean, I think that's fine. As long as
I'd
he's
love to
got
hear what he
us.
says about what's possible, because it
Yeah.
maybe he would think it would be really like, we can say that one of our long-term solutions is to establish the future senior center as a cooling shelter. Is there any way that you guys can help us during this planning process to, make that part of establish that plan? Because I'd love to know if that's even an option, because then that could be like something we could work towards.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Good point. All right. Well, let's try and do that. So today we're the 24th. Yeah. So this thing would be due like in a week if we were to do the actual form. But as long as we're on his radar now, he knows the town of Southampton is interested. I think we're okay. I'm not going to worry so much about the deadline on that. So good. So this is the main thing I think we have before us to work on, like right now. There's nothing else immediate. The other one I was just going to share, I did get, we talked about being turned down for the firefighters thing.
Oh, is it back on
And
again?
yeah, so that one's going to be coming up again. And um, we finally got our, what they call the turn down letter, which I think it's here. Let's see, which is just kind of interesting. So yeah, so this basically, thanks for applying, blah, blah, blah. We didn't score high enough to receive further consideration. So what happens here, if you remember, this one has an electronic review first. You make it
Yeah.
through the electronic review, then it goes to a peer review. You make it through the peer review, then it goes to a technical review. In both of the grants, so for the self-contained breathing apparatus and for the pumper truck, we didn't even make it past the electronic review. So here they are, telling how much, most competitive grant program. Well, I would believe that. So they had over 7,000 applications. Okie dokie. So very much. So there was a computer-based preliminary score, and then it goes on to these next ones. So we did not score enough in the initial pre-score assessment to even get to the panel review. So they don't tell us any more than that. They do have some other information on their website. Both Chief Fasoli and I sat in on a webinar that talks about some of the common mistakes and so forth that people make. We're going to take, he and I met just the other day, and we're going to take a look at the actual application we submitted last year, because we're going to pretty much cut and paste when this opens up again. But he's got to do some updating of figures, number one. So, a lot of the statistics, the call runs for the ambulance and, all that stuff. So he's going to work already on updating the facts and figures part. But we need to kind of get a sense of what are the things that are being looked for in that electronic generated part. And I have the name of a person. I don't know if he'll talk to me about it or not, but I have a name and a contact for somebody with the program that might give us a clue of, more detail, because they're not going to give feedback for 7,000 people more individually, obviously, but just to give us a clue of the kinds of things they're looking for in that computer section so that we don't get kicked out. So I'm going to try to connect with them next week and see if I can get any more clarity on that. Because I think that would help us understand if there's some, special keywords that the computer, is looking for. These computer ones are really tough because they have their own algorithms and programs of what they want, and I don't know how we're supposed to know what all that is. So it puts
I actually wonder if it'd be worth looking at. So they have self-evaluation. I'm really curious. FEMA.gov.
Yeah. Right. So there's a toolkit, and the checklist and the toolkit. We had all that
Yeah, but
last
I
time.
wonder if the hints are in there. Like if you look at the wouldn't
It
that be
might,
the purpose?
it could
Maybe.
be. Yeah, it could be. And then there's some online tutorials. So we didn't take advantage of that last year because we had this, the chief from Southwick, helping us do this. So, he works for grant writing organizations, and that's what they do is put in applications for the firefighters grant. So it's like, all right, we theoretically have, somebody who's done this before helping us out, but
Yeah, I also wonder if
didn't
if
help
he
us.
was like reading the narrative development toolkit and the
Yeah,
like I wonder if it's just one of those things where this seems like one where it'd be great to have somebody who had previous grant, strong grant writing experience to like, or maybe it's because we were a small town with 6,000 people and the impact would be small. Like maybe it's
yeah.
something as simple as that.
Well, and like I say, the chief works for the grant writing organization. I mean, he is, that's part of what he does now. He's a retired chief. So that organization he works for is the one that develops grants for various communities. So, we thought we were going in the right direction to get an outside person to help us, but anyway, it didn't, it's a very competitive grant. So, but obviously we missed something. So I think your point is well taken on looking at the self-evaluation tools that are back on the website now. I don't recall doing that before. We looked at the checklist and various other things to make sure we had done everything we needed to do in terms of submitting the right kinds of information, but that may help us a little bit more. So we'll take a look at that. But that one will be, I would think, will be opening up next month. So and we've got until like February or March to apply for it. So, it took us a while last time to pull it all together, but we'll see if we.
Looking at this application checklist, and it says, how many firefighters do you represent? How many of your active firefighters are trained level 1?
Right, we had all that. Yep.
But no,
Yep.
I'm saying, look at these questions. Does your department have a community paramedic program? How many stations? Maybe those are the things that are scored by a computer. We have one station, right? Like
Yeah.
we have essentially a very small firefighter program. Do you offer live fire training? I don't know. Like maybe we just don't, maybe we're in the
Yeah.
bigger picture, like maybe they're just looking at bigger, communities with a bigger impact.
Could be, but anyway, so we'll see. So anyway, just to say that the chief is already just going to be gathering some of that information, updating his staff roster and all the basic facts and figures that go along with both the fire and the EMS side of things. So we'll be kind of ready anyway whenever it opens up, I think. So
Okay.
these are the two that are kind of on our horizon as far as I know. That's that. Okay.
Okay, great. So do you want to try to connect again before the first, or do you feel like
I
you're
don't I don't know that we really need to. I mean, I think what I can do is try to send out that email to the MVP group and ask for some input so that, again, keeping in mind that we've got this hazard mitigation public meeting on the 12th, I'm wondering
right?
if I could schedule something with this guy, a couple of days after that, because that we might get some information, from that. Like I say, those two plans really overlap a fair amount. Um, and then that would give people like the Randalls of the world, a couple of weeks to kind of react and say, I think we could do this. So that if we had a meeting with him somewhere, I don't know, whatever, I'm not looking at my calendar, but the week of the
Mhm.
15th or something like that, and invite this guy to join us.
Yeah, that would be great.
That might be
I'd
an idea.
like
So
to know, I haven't really seen the updated hazard mitigation plan, but like, is there maybe it would be helpful to take that proposed plan or what's been drafted and kind of overlaps to see if there's like themes that emerge from looking at those two documents, because I imagine we could, that's probably going to be one of the questions on the MVP is, does this initiative align with other
mhm,
town
sure.
plans? That comes up a
Yeah,
lot.
correct.
So
Yeah, that's true. Yep. Okay.
yeah.
Good.
So if you want to do it afterwards, I'm happy with whatever
Yeah,
you
I
want to
don't
do.
from the way he said it on the phone, I don't think we have to be so concerned about that November 1 date. I think Southampton's on his radar right now, so and he said he'd be willing to talk it through. So I think we'll take him up on that rather than and still, after we talk to him, fill out the EOI. I think we could, although he may say it's not necessary because I mean, we could fill it out for ourselves, just to,
Right.
have it, but they may not accept it after the first. I don't know, but he certainly sounded amenable to having a discussion with us, irrespective of the deadline. So we'll see. Okay.
Awesome. Okay.
All right, great. All right. Well, next time, so I think I'm going to try and schedule these meetings for Mondays because that was the day. Mondays and Fridays were the day that Bruce said he's available. He's got grandkids apparently in between time. So I'm going to try
Mondays
Monday
are good for
afternoon.
me. A few of my scheduled meetings actually got moved off of a Monday. I had
Okay.
reserved on my schedule to avoid other people putting stuff between 12 and 2.
Okay, perfect.
So I just like made that a standing like block on my schedule so that way whatever we end up deciding, like no one's going to put a scheduled meeting during those times.
Good. No, that's good. I'd kind of like to avoid Fridays. I mean, I try to have Friday to myself.
Yeah, well,
So
you deserve that. It's not fair to you, especially well, does Scott work on Fridays?
he does actually. Yeah, yeah,
But like for you, that's Fridays for me are awful, and like
yeah.
you deserve a weekend. You deserve rest. Period. You're like you don't feel like you're
We all do.
tired.
We all do. So yeah. So whenever we figure it out, it'll be a Monday. I'll tell you that. I just don't know when, but I think we could. We can get through I think the 12th is a Tuesday.
So we could meet the following Monday if you wanted to.
Yeah. So either that, I guess it would be the 18th, or depending on if we hear back from any of the MVP committee, we could invite him to a meeting on the 11th, which would be the day before the hazard mitigation plan one.
Whatever works.
Yeah.
Maybe we put that out there and see if the people would be interested in attending a collaborative
Yeah.
discussion meeting or something.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. All right. Well, with that, let's take a little motion to adjourn. I think we don't have any other business.
I don't think so either. And I'll make sure it looks like the notes I did write them, so I will
Okay.
research them and I'll do
Sorry.
I
I
have
think
decided it's
yep.
okay.
I guess I didn't pull them down.
It's okay. So we'll do that next time. All right,
Yep.
motion to adjourn.
All right. I'll second that. We are adjourned at 2:53.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.